It was striking to me to learn that the U.S. owns just 3% of the global commercial fleet.
Yeah.
China owns, somebody said, I think, 1/5.
Yes.
And I know that's kind of trended down significantly after World War II. How did the state of U.S. shipbuilding get to this point, and why, in your view, is this something that needs to be addressed?
Yeah. It got to this point over a period of time, and I think there's been a recent realization, especially during the pandemic and post-pandemic, that we need to think about our national resiliency and factor that into our policymaking in meaningful ways as it relates to semiconductors, as it relates to critical minerals, and frankly, many other major inputs to our economy. And the reason for that is because, you know, we have for years relied on the brilliance of the market, and the market is brilliant at matching supply and demand, and you know, generating prosperity, and it's remarkable. But oftentimes there are economic decisions made, say for semiconductors, that don't factor in the broader spillover benefits of manufacturing certain key inputs here. So semiconductors is like the most obvious example, I think, to most people. And in that case, you have direct use of these semiconductors for our military on a regular basis. They go into our nuclear missile submarines and our weapons platforms and all the rest. They're also essential to running a modern economy. Why do I lay that groundwork? Because there's a similar imperative that requires us to invest in ships. Labor costs are lower overseas. Other countries are significantly subsidizing through industrial policy their own shipbuilding enterprises. And the pure economics of it would suggest that we just rely on comparative advantage, and we allow other companies to make all the ships. We allow other shipping companies to move our commodities and our products to and fro, so we can run a modern economy. But leaving all those decisions up to just basic market analysis of individual companies or firms or market actors overlooks the fact that there is a national and economic security risk that our adversaries will withhold goods or services for geopolitical reasons. They will weaponize our interdependencies, right? And so just as we couldn't allow China to weaponize our interdependencies by interrupting supply chains in the future for semiconductors, or seizing fabs located in other countries, or as they can grow their semiconductor economy, withholding their own key inputs, we also can't rely on other countries for critical national security relevant inputs. So the short answer is this is an issue of national and economic security, and we need the capacity to build ships in time of war and to repair ships. We don't have that capacity right now. If a war lasted more than a few months, we couldn't build and repair ships. We just don't have enough trained people and yard space and modernized infrastructure to accomplish that very obviously national security relevant task. But in times of peace, we need to be less reliant on China and other countries to move our inputs into our economy and our finished goods and commodities out of the economy. So that's it. That's a long answer, but I want to give you a complete kind of contextualized answer, because thematically there's a direct connection between this work and what I did on the CHIPS Act.
And so how does this legislation specifically rectify this situation in practice?
Yeah, so through a number of means, as with all these problems, you have to take a cross-cutting approach. So number one, we need more trained labor that can build ships and work in shipyards, and train merchant mariners who can go to sea. So we implement those workforce training programs and resource them through this legislation. We also need, so I mean that provides great opportunities for jobs for American workers, including many workers here in the state of Indiana, and we can get into the Indiana relevance more later if you like. Ooh, coffee's coming. No, number two, we invite in foreign capital to modernize our shipyards, to create a vested interest by the South Koreans in particular, but also the Japanese, the Europeans, and others who have more shipbuilding experience than we do, to teach us how modern ships are built because they're very good at it, and to deploy their capital and invest in new modernization techniques and equipment. So we do that. There may also be some opportunities for the state of Indiana, certainly for other states in the industrial Midwest, as it relates to that. And then lastly, we deregulate the shipbuilding and also the shipping. We make targeted incentives to help in some of these areas. We were very careful with asking the taxpayers to fund any of this. So we're sparing as it relates to targeted incentives. And then we try and capture existing funding streams through locks and dams fees, through port fees, and we put them into a maritime trust fund. Just as we have a dedicated highway trust fund, we want an ongoing revenue stream to create certainty about this industry and create investor and policy certainty so that this whole project can work into the future, and so that we can, from a shipbuilding standpoint, we can build 250 ships over the next 10 years.
And how do you feel about the prospects of its passage? Obviously, this
Yeah.
and the Chips and Science Acts, another version of industrial policy with bipartisan support. How do you feel about its prospects?
Quite good. President Trump is really enthusiastic about this. In fact, we dropped this legislation last year. Myself and Senator Kelly have been improving it since that period of time. And President Trump issued an executive order consistent with this whole project, and his executive order is titled Restoring America's Maritime Dominance. He does a great job laying out what the problem is, the problem definition. This legislation is the solution. And so we've broken the legislation into two different vehicles. One is one that will stand up and authorize various programs, kind of puts in place the different cross-cutting vectors of effort that I laid out. And the second one it's going to be harder to get through, but I think with the president's persuasive capacity, we should do it later this year, I hope. And that's the funding piece related to the targeted investments and tax provisions. So we busted those out, and we think that we can marry them up once they kind of get through the process. But that's the inside baseball answer as it relates to how we're going to get it through the process. In short, President Trump's on board. There are opportunities, economic opportunities for every state in the country that wants to participate in this effort. That will be popular. And I think people are able to intuit a lot more naturally how this relates to national security than, frankly, semiconductors. So I think we've got things lined up for success.
All right. right. And I understand that you're going to maybe stop by Cummins after
Yeah,
this.
and I would note, if you take a look at, if you have any interest, take a look at those entities, those organizations that have endorsed this legislation. It's pretty remarkable. I mean, we continue to build out that list, but almost every organized labor stakeholder you can imagine, private industry, private associations, national security luminaries. I mean, this is something that I think people across America from different political persuasions and perspectives understand is really important. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
You're right. So I want to transition a little bit to the president's tariff policy.
Yeah.
Obviously, as you know, Columbus is a manufacturing-based area. Cummins and Toyota Material Handling are really important to the local economy.
Yes.
Cummins, in their second quarter earning call just last week, said that they've done pretty well weathering some of the early effects of the tariffs through the first couple quarters, but that may be a shift in the third quarter. And then the Columbus Mayor, Mary Fredon, back in April, I know, sent a letter to yourself, Congressman Shreve, and Senator Banks, describing how she believes the tariffs will have adverse effects on this region that will take years to recover from. And of course, new tariffs on 90 countries went into effect on Thursday night. Do you think this tariff strategy has been effective? And do you have a sense at this point on the end game?
Yeah. It depends on who you talk to. And I get all sorts of different perspectives, as you might imagine. When I talk to business leaders, I talk to some who are very enthusiastic about the tariffs. Typically, that's because their company happens to benefit from reducing competition, or they see that at the end of this, they will benefit immeasurably from reducing competition, and there can be opposition to these tariffs on the same grounds, which is no, we think we need more competition. It lowers our input costs. I think most individuals I speak to, even some who support this, would say the way they have been implemented has created a lot of uncertainty in the economy. And I think most everyone would benefit. It's fair to say, because I have conversations every day with all kinds of people, most everyone would benefit, from consumers to business people to investors to our foreign partners, and who aren't just economic actors, but they're like our friends and allies. We'd all benefit from more certainty. And so what I've tried to encourage the president to do for months, and I still encourage him, and I think recent actions suggest he's taking this to heart, is pocket the substantial concessions, and no one can get concessions like President Trump. And so pocket those concessions from our trading partners, reset trade relations, and create certainty, and let's move on. And then the last bit is, and this is where I think most Americans understood we were headed when President Trump was going to tackle unfair, non-tariff and tariff barriers by other countries. The last piece is unify all the large economy countries that mostly play by the rules. They're not perfect. We're probably not perfect either, but unify all of them, and then collectively bring to bear our leverage against China, because they're the real offender. They're the stealers of intellectual property and weaponizer of markets, and they dump goods, and all these unfair and predatory economic actions need to be addressed. We need to reset relations. So that's, I wasn't elected president, but that's where I think we should head. And you can imagine the president doing that. He's already reset relations with the EU just days ago, Japan. So we're starting to see exactly what I hoped we would see. I just hope it continues.
Do you think that Congress should be taking more of a forceful role in this policy?
Yeah, listen,
Is there an appetite on behalf of your caucus, you think, of doing anything about
I pretty jealously guard congressional prerogatives. So I signed on to co-sponsored legislation pretty recently that said when a President AOC or a President Bernie Sanders or a President Donald Trump declares an economic emergency, Congress should have to sanction whether or not that actually constitutes an emergency under the law, right? Speaker of the House indicated he wasn't going to bring that legislation to the floor, so it kind of died. And he was no doubt protecting the president. And I understand that. You know, I've been in Washington long enough. I understand the politics of it. But the short answer is yes. I think Congress needs to continue to protect its prerogatives. I can't remember when a president has so forcefully asserted his powers over the trade portfolio. I'm not arguing that the president's actions are outside of the bounds of the law. I do think that the courts will have their say on that pretty soon, especially as it relates to the international economic emergency. I think those prerogatives will soon be better understood when the court speaks. But you know, my job is understanding that the president campaigned on and was highly successful campaigning on a platform of tariffs. Most of my constituents support this. They want me to be supportive of the president. And so I accept that we're going to have pretty robust tariffs. I actually favor them in narrow circumstances. Sometimes the current application is not narrow, but I'm going to be constructive in ensuring the president is the most successful president in modern history, and that's something that can still be accomplished.
And then on the immigration front, Camp Atterbury, as you're aware, back in July, and then just this week, the Miami Correctional Facility are being proposed as sites for immigrant detainees. I'd like to start with Camp Atterbury first.
I'll go back. I want to volunteer something to you. This idea, I'm starting to hear that we need to, in exchange for the tariffs, we need to redistribute income from the American people to compensate. You know, hear this in the ag sector, to compensate for losses on account of the tariffs.
Is that the dividend the president?
Yeah, something like that. I'm not particularly warm to that idea. And it's typically people who enthusiastically supported the president's broader agenda, helping him to his political success, who are now coming back and asking consumers to effectively pay for their operations, which have been adversely impacted by tariffs. And that doesn't seem, I understand, I'm here for the people of Indiana broadly, all of them. But I do think that these are the sorts of things that we're going to have to be working through in coming months. And I'm open to counter arguments, but not yet persuaded by those arguments.
So back to Camp Atterbury, do you think it's an appropriate use of the base for detention of immigrants? And have you gotten any clarity from the administration for when we may see that begin? I believe your office sent out a statement when the announcement was made that you were going to reach out for more information. Have you gotten that?
DOD has approved the facility, and that's all we know. We have no knowledge of an authorization to actually go ahead and locate, criminal aliens in Atterbury. We've made it known that we want to be notified before those decisions are being operationalized, right? But it is my very strong understanding, informed by back and forth with the administration, that no decision has been made to move forward. Now, Miami Correctional Facility,
the so-called Speedway Slammer, as the secretary referred to it as.
Yes. Yes. The Miami Correctional Facility area, that's been greenlit, of course, and it's evidently on track. Although there again, we don't have a lot of details about how that's going to work. I know that the governor presumably does. He was up there for the press conference.
Yeah. But do you think Camp Atterbury, do you think that's an appropriate use of the base?
You know, I think it's not a tortured argument to say that having an unchecked flow of millions of unauthorized persons into our country in recent years has created a genuine national security threat, and it is the president's prerogative to deal with national security issues. This is not an overstatement. This is not an exaggeration. Years ago, you can check, before, frankly, even immigration was being discussed as a national security issue, when I campaigned for re-election, my first commercials out of the barrel were border security issues before this was the top issue among Republicans. I thought it was very important, and I framed it as a national security issue. Prior to that, I had requested, along with my colleague Chris Murphy, a classified briefing to learn about potential terrorist what do you call those cells here? The I'm drawing a blank on the word, but we had them 9/11. Anyway, terrorist cells here on account of illegal immigration. There's some sobering things I discovered. So it's not irrational when you have millions of unchecked persons from all around the world, places that are hotbeds for terrorist groups and activities to our adversaries. We've identified people coming across the border during that period of time when we weren't catching many, but we caught some people who were on the terrorist watch list. So all that is to say, I agree with the president that this is a national security issue. I don't think it's inappropriate so long as you follow existing statutes. By my reading, those have been followed thus far, and that you notify local communities. He's done that. You work through local and state authorities. President, he's done all of that. So I'm going to defend him in a muscular way for that.
And so you don't have any concerns about these folks who did break the law to enter the country, but they're still subject to due process. You're not concerned that at either of these facilities that would be?
I think due process should be followed. Yeah, and it's a fundamental tenet of our legal system, and in every instance, And
do you think that across the country that's been happening?
There have been a couple of cases. There was the Maryland individual, for example, who's not from Maryland originally, right? I mean, this is not the sort of person you want to be really defending, right? He's an unsympathetic background, and by all the various evidence that we publicly have access to. But even in those cases, our country sends a message to our own people, to the world, that we're a country of laws, not of men, when we stick with the letter of the law when it comes to due process. Now, in that case, it's more complicated than we all often interpreted it to be, because the administrative law judges are actually Article 2 judges, so that means they're like executive branch appointees. So it's not as though it's an independent judiciary in the same sense that your Article 3 judges are, right? And so that does, for me, that muddies the water, but hey, I was just a country attorney for a couple of years. What do I know? I'm not attempting to litigate that broader issue, in the event we have some constitutional authority. It tells me the Article 2, Article 3 distinction. The broader point is, yes, I believe in due process. I think the administration does. And I think they need to be committed to continuing to follow due process as it relates to these cases. And I think Congress needs to oversee that. Yeah.
A couple of your colleagues, the vice president and the governor, met yesterday. And one of the things that they did talk about was potential redistricting in Indiana.
Yes.
Obviously, this comes after a request by the president to do so in Texas.
Yes.
To essentially shore up seats in the event that the House may flip during the midterms. It's begun to spur some retaliation by Democrats, particularly in California. What are your thoughts on this, particularly in Indiana? Gerrymandering is not new, as you know, but isn't this particularly brazen?
Yeah, it's rich that a lot of my Democratic colleagues are now piping up about this. There was great inattention to this matter of partisan gerrymandering, and not a whole lot of media interest. You weren't around, so it'd be unfair to pull you into this. Back when I campaigned for Congress in 2010, and I talked about the issue of partisan gerrymandering, and I ran in a heavily gerrymandered district, which had been created for then Congressman Barron Hill, and all the rest. So I'll say that. And if you really want to see gerrymandered districts, just travel west a little bit and go to Illinois and take a look at the good governor's handiwork. But I'm going to answer your question, right? I think we could be headed for a tit-for-tat situation, kind of a race to the bottom as it relates to redistricting. That said, this is not in my lane as a legal matter, right? This is up to state legislatures, which always historically have had some measure of politics and self-interest integrated into the decisions about when you redistrict. What seems to be novel here and will continue to be a subject of public debate, a debate that I won't be actively participating in, but offering, I think, a fair response to you, is the mid-stream, that is before the annual census comes out or the every 10-year decennial census, right? That's typically when the redistricting has occurred. And so the argument is, well, they're within the law, it's permitted to do this. And then the consideration as a policy matter and a normative matter for all of us as citizens should be, yes, but even if it's legal, is this wise, right? And I think that's where Hoosiers are going to have to decide whether or not this feels right.
And by Hoosiers, you mean?
I mean,
the Republican state.
I mean, not graduates of Indiana University, but instead, everyone from the state of Indiana are going to have to decide whether or not they want to call their state representatives, state senators, the governor's office, anyone else who is at a state level actively involved in this decision, and say, we think this is a good idea, or we think this is a real crappy idea, right? Right? Did I answer your question?
You did.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to make clear this is not something Todd Young's going to decide. And, I offered enough there for you to so you know I'm not dodging it, but I don't spend a lot of time on things that I'm not in control of.
Yeah. I asked just because, in your office, you still have the bully pulpit in effect, and you do have some influence.
Yeah.
Although you're not a direct
I recognize that. Yeah, that's why I didn't punt.
I did also.
And for better or worse, that's why I almost never punt. So I at least do my best. Yeah, huh?
You go for it on fourth down, is that?
Yeah, exactly. 4th and 3, yeah.
So I did like to ask you about the ongoing war and humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Yeah.
1 in 3 Palestinians are going without food for days at a time, according to the UN. And just yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Israel is planning to take control of all of Gaza in an effort to recapture Gaza City. Are we any closer to a ceasefire, you think, than we were a year ago? And is there anything more Congress as a body can do to address the hunger crisis in Gaza?
I'm not I'm not sure. I think we're all asking ourselves these questions and throwing up our hands, hopefully not in resignation, but to figure out what the next steps are, how we can affect positive change as we see this horrific, heart-wrenching situation play out on the ground. I mean, the most obvious answer to me is the monstrous terrorists actually demonstrate that they care for their people, they release hostages, and immediately, the situation could be resolved and food channels for food distribution provided and all the rest. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen. As much leverage as the Israelis have tried to apply, the Hamas terrorists stay underneath the ground in their tunnels, sometimes burrow beneath hospitals, and are eating like kings while the people that they purport to represent and fight for are starving to death. So it's monstrous, and you can imagine how the American people would respond if our people were detained below ground like this. I can remember post 9/11 how we felt, and so I aim to go over there and learn more about where the conflict is here and now, and what daylight we might be able to squint and find to bring this thing to positive resolution. So in the next couple of months, I intend to go to Israel, if allowed, and I can report back if you like.
When was the last time that you had been to?
It's been a few years, and I'm due as someone who cares a lot about the relationship in the region. Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about was, I had mentioned to you the last time that I had seen you came to Columbus at Hotel Indigo to talk about housing affordability.
Yeah.
And we spoke maybe 2-3 questions after, and you had some pretty strong words describing the president. Obviously, you didn't endorse him in the lead up to 2024. Have you felt any pressure or any consequences on behalf of the administration because of some of the things that you had said?
Nope. The president's been gracious. I guess a lot of people are surprised because he can be a tough guy, and he's pugilistic and brutal to people who sometimes disagree with him or oppose him. But I found him to be quite dignified and gracious and constructive in his conversations with me. So we spoke days after the election. I gave him a ring and congratulated him on his victory, told him that I was determined to do whatever I could to help him be the most successful modern president that we've had. And I also told him that wouldn't always mean that we agreed. His success would be from my vantage point, not as he always defined success, and he understood that. And he just and he said, let's find some things to work together on. And I told the president, I said, listen, I'm not only a conservative who cares deeply about the country, but I'm a conservative that I think can get you some Democrat votes, because if you want to make a permanent dent in the direction of the country and have a permanent legacy, you need to actually pass laws, not just act from the executive branch, right? And he understands that. And so what you've seen is us partnering on some really major initiatives. The Ships for America Act is probably the most obvious example of that. I mean, this could be the signature or a signature accomplishment of his administration. It could help fulfill his promise to usher in a golden age of manufacturing, resonate with his base across the industrial Midwest who could realize the benefits of this legislation, enhance our national security. And so that's an example of an area where the president and I have been able to work well together. The One Big Beautiful Bill is another example. I helped draft this legislation. I helped get it across the line. And, you know, I think on balance, it was the right course for America now. I know the president appreciates that. So not only does the president have narrow margins, and he understands the importance of working with independent-minded conservatives like myself, but I think he sincerely believes, and he's right, that I'm going to do everything I can to help him be successful on his important work.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
That's all I got. Thank you, Senator.
Great. Thank you.